Welcome back to the Dynasty Nerds YouTube channel. Marvin Elequin here with episode 3 of Dynasty Rankings versus ADP. And this should be a fun one as we dive into the tight end position, a position where there's a lot of inconsistency outside of the top tier of tight ends. And that's exactly why it's even more crucial to find that next breakout tight end to give you guys an edge in your Dynasty lineups. And that's the goal with this video. I want to give you guys 3 tight ends here today that I value higher than consensus ADP. And with that, let's dive in. The first tight end that I want to highlight for you guys is Irv Smith, Vikings tight end, who's currently being drafted as the tight end 14 in Dynasty ADP. I have him ranked as my tight end 10, and coming into the league in 2019, he was slightly overshadowed in a very talented tight end class that was headlined by TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant. But regardless, we saw some of that upside that we're looking forward to here over the next couple of years from Irv Smith, where he racked up 710 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns in his final year at Alabama, leading that tight end class that year in yards per route run with 2.56. Now, we didn't see much from him in 2019 or even to start the 2020 season because he was playing behind Kyle Rudolph or splitting snaps and targets with Kyle Rudolph. And he also dealt with a couple of injuries in his 2020 season that held him back and kept him from breaking out in his second year, at least early on, because that would change later on in the season when Kyle Rudolph would actually suffer a foot injury and Irv Smith would take over that tight end 1 role and be the lead tight end for this Vikings offense. Over the last 4 weeks of the season, Irv Smith was actually the tight end 8 in PPR points per game with 12.8. He was tied for tight end 2 in touchdowns per game with 0.8. And he did all of that despite only ranking as the tight end 17 in weighted opportunity rating. So he wasn't necessarily the focal point of that Vikings offense, but he's still very efficient with the opportunities that he received. That also included a tight end 1 performance where he finished as the tight end 1 in week 16 with 23.3 points. So if you started Irv Smith and were desperate at tight end and plugged him in, well, he likely won you your championship with a very, very dominant performance. Now, none of this will really matter if Kyle Rudolph was still on the team and Irv Smith still has to split snaps and targets with him. Well, per over the cap, Kyle Rudolph could actually be a cut candidate. If he were designated as a post-June 1 cut, the Vikings could save upwards of $8 million this year and next year with their cap. And considering what Irv Smith did to end the year, I would not be surprised if they went that route, especially with the cap situation right now. It would make sense if Kyle Rudolph was released and then they handed the keys to Irv Smith and made him the lead tight end for this offense going forward. Now, if that were to happen, Irv Smith's ADP would really skyrocket and it would really cement his value as a dynasty tight end 1. So get ahead of the game and trade for him now while his ADP is lower, because if he were to receive the opportunity, we saw that his upside could be a weekly tight end 1 for fantasy. The second tight end on my list is Tennessee Titans tight end Jonnu Smith, who's also a free agent, so he might not necessarily be playing for Tennessee next year, but he's currently being drafted as a tight end 14 in consensus Dynasty ADP, and in my rankings, I have him as my tight end 11. His free agency does cloud his future and potential for Dynasty, but regardless, it was encouraging to see him improve and play very well in his 2020 season, at least to start the year. He set career highs in PPR points per game with 9.3. That was good for tight end 15 on the year. He set career highs in target share with 15%, receiving yards with 448, and receptions with 41. And to start off the year, we actually saw him absolutely dominate and on fire for that Tennessee Titans offense. For the first 5 weeks, he was the tight end 3 in PPR points per game with 17.5, the tight end 5 in yards per game with 55.2, and the tight end 6 in weighted opportunity rating. And yes, A.J. Brown did miss some time to start the year, but 2 of Smith's best games came in weeks 1 and 5 when A.J. Brown was on the field. However, we did see a tale of two halves for Smith. After week 5, he was actually less productive compared to his first 5 weeks in the 2020 season. Going forward, he was only the tight end 29 in PPR points per game with 6.3. That's behind guys like Dan Arnold, Jimmy Graham, Trey Burton. He would exceed 5 targets only in 4 of his 11 games the rest of the way. But regardless, he was still very efficient and productive on the opportunities he received, and you do love to see that from a young tight end. He was the tight end 3 in total touchdowns, tight end 13 in yards per route run with 1.63, and also the tight end 9 in quarterback rating when targeted with 110.1, which shows that good things tend to happen when Smith is targeted in that offense. Now, as I mentioned, there is some uncertainty as to where he will play next year, but he is still a young tight end, only turning 26 here. And whichever team pays him, they will commit to using him in the offense, which means he will still carry that tight end 1 upside, assuming he lands in the right situation. The last tight end that I want to highlight for you guys today is O.J. Howard, Tampa Bay Buccaneers tight end, who actually had a shortened season because of a ruptured Achilles that he suffered back in week 4. He's currently being drafted as the tight end 24 in consensus Dynasty ADP, and in my rankings, I have him as my Dynasty tight end 20. Despite the shortened season, he was actually one of the more productive tight ends in the league on a per game basis. He was the tight end 14 in PPR points per game with 9.4. And on a small sample size, in 50% of his games, he finished as a top 10 tight end in 2020. He also averaged 2.48 yards per route run, according to Player Profiler. That's right behind Travis Kelce's yards per route run, higher than Darren Waller, Mark Andrews, and nearly a full yard more than TJ Hawkinson's yards per route run. So he was very efficient on his opportunities and very effective as a tight end when he was healthy on the field in those 4 games. And also another fun fact that I want to share with you guys, O.J. Howard is actually only one of 18 tight ends since 2000 with a minimum of 1,200 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns in their first 3 years in the league. And of those 18 tight ends, O.J. Howard actually leads that group in yards per reception with 15.5 and yards per target with 10.4. So once again, we see that theme of efficiency where O.J. Howard was very efficient to start his career in his first 3 years. And then that carried over in 2020 where he was very effective and efficient with the opportunities that he received in those 4 games. Now, he enters a contract year in 2021. It's possible that Gronk returns again for another year. And I'm actually not as concerned about that because he did out-target Gronk in 3 of the 4 games that they played together. But the bigger concern that we as dynasty managers have is the injury concern, the Achilles injury that he suffered. Well, according to Matthew Betts, who I spoke to, he's an injury analyst for the Fantasy Footballers and Ball Blast Football. Be sure to follow him at the Fantasy PT. He actually provided some encouraging information for O.J. Howard and his health going forward. A ruptured Achilles, according to Matthew Betts, is actually worse for running backs and linebackers compared to other positions. The injury resulted in a less productive year 1, but not necessarily a less productive year 2. So that actually bodes well for O.J. Howard's long-term fantasy upside, that we can likely expect a less productive year 1, at least this upcoming fantasy season. But personally, I still believe in O.J. Howard, especially after hearing that right there. And considering his talent and tight end 1 upside, Howard, in my opinion, could be a draft or trade target for teams that need a potential difference maker at the tight end position, where there's a lot of inconsistency across the board outside of that top tier, as I already mentioned. But considering his lower ADP of tight end 24, I definitely think O.J. Howard is someone who has at this point a low cost, but potentially a high reward for dynasty managers. All right, so that wraps up episode number 3 of the Dynasty Rankings versus ADP series. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Be on the lookout for another one highlighting the quarterback position. But until then, Nerd Herd, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell to stay up to date for all of our content as we help you guys prepare for the NFL Draft and the 2021 Dynasty season.